Everyone's been hating on the PlayStation Portal even before it was released, but what if I told you that they're all wrong? This thing is worth the money, does what it sets out to do, and has the potential to improve in the future. The PlayStation Portal is the most accessible way to play the PlayStation 5. All you have to do is sign into your PlayStation account, connect to your PS5 like you would typically with Remote Play, and boom, you're swinging through New York on the small screen. But this thing costs $200, which some people hate. However, that price point makes total sense when you look at the cost of materials. A DualSense typically sells for $70. A 1080p tablet will typically run you about $100, and the cost of labor and assembly is priceless. Now, you're also likely paying for the software at that point, which adds up to the $200 price tag. So if the price makes sense, why are so many people against this thing? Aside from Sony's graveyard of short-lived non-console devices, many complained about latency issues through Remote Play, the inability to use streaming apps like Netflix, and the strangely absent inclusion of Bluetooth. Now, neither the PS5 nor the Xbox Series console support Bluetooth audio, so this isn't only a Sony problem. But the biggest issue people have with the Portal is that they think it solves a problem that many don't have, a need to use a device that only uses Remote Play. So many leading up to the launch wondered who would buy this if you could use a backbone that cost half the price, or connect your phone or tablet to a DualSense. And while these options are viable, imagine this: you have to go to the hospital with your sick child for a week. They're sleeping, you have nothing else to do because you're sitting in the hospital. Now, your family members, your wife, your significant other wants the status update on what's going on with the child as things are happening. So you don't want to take away your phone's ability to actually communicate with your loved ones, but you still want to be able to access your PlayStation games at home to kill the downtime at the hospital. Many caregivers know what I'm talking about. Just because your child's in the hospital doesn't mean you're doing anything. It just means you're there. You just have to be physically present. And that's where the Portal allows me to keep my phone on hand like I am going to have to be at the hospital, but also still enjoy my games without having to bust out an unwieldy tablet setup. And people hating on this thing don't realize that just because something isn't for them doesn't mean no one should ever use it. So many people like myself want to play their PlayStation games more, but don't want to spend the extra money for a Steam Deck or an ROG Ally, or another solution that does still cost a lot of money. But for $200, you can play on your PS5 without buying an entire Windows handheld to do one thing. If you use a backbone, you have to give up many of the features you otherwise have on the Portal. You lose easy access to your phone and will likely be interrupted anytime you get a text or call. And ergonomically, the grips are flat and small compared to the Portal, and you don't get to experience the adaptive triggers and the haptic feedback. Most other handhelds don't feature great rumble and pale in comparison to the immersion you actually achieve with the DualSense. That is, until this thing came out. Worse yet, you have to cough up $40 a year just to keep access to the Backbone's Game Hub launcher, 1080p 60 recordings, and the ability to use it on PC and iOS devices. Forgoing the backbone and using just your phone means using Remote Play's touch controls. No one likes touch controls, and you're lying if you say you do. But if you do want a dedicated gaming handheld at the same price, you can check out something like the Ein Odin. However, you'll have worse ergonomics, a smaller screen, and no DualSense features. However, you can do things like access Game Pass in Android games since it is an Android tablet. Other handhelds, like the Razer Edge, feature haptics, but you're paying double for what you would with the PS Portal. And I wouldn't even recommend looking at the Logitech G Cloud. Once I got my hands on the Portal, I found myself actually excited at how often I get to use this. There's a reason everybody is calling this the Dad Station 5. There are many scenarios where I don't have to be actively parenting my kids, but I still need to be physically present. Take example, last night after I got my Portal, my two older children were doing the dishes. I need to kind of manage and make sure that it's all going according to plan, but I'm not actually helping them with anything. But if I leave, I know that chaos can ensue. So my physical presence just being there actually aids with the dishes process going smoothly. Now, normally, I can't play my games while I'm just standing around, and the Portal actually allows me to do that in cases where presence is needed as a parent, but not attention of mind. But also sitting in my bed and playing games without going to my living room makes me so happy. I get to play games while my wife watches TV, and I can turn on the console without worrying that I changed the input to the PS5 because Remote Play doesn't switch that over. Now, that is a standard feature of Remote Play, but it's convenient nonetheless. And it's perfect for the holidays, as the kids can use the Portal as both a controller and a second screen, since other controllers can still be paired to the system while Remote Play is in use. However, I can't stress enough that you ensure the 5 GHz band is in use before you start playing games on the Portal. For some reason, the PS5 will default to using the 2.4 GHz bands on a wireless connection, despite it having the ability to switch to the more powerful signal. Even after switching to 5 GHz, you may still need to tinker with the settings, because while my PS5 was connected via 5 GHz Wi-Fi, my Portal wasn't, and unfortunately, Sony doesn't give you a whole lot of options on the Portal to change and configure things. You essentially get to connect to your Wi-Fi or forget your Wi-Fi. You don't get to actually change anything. So I had to go into my router settings and make sure that my Portal is always on 5 GHz, which smooths out the connection incredibly. This is an area where Sony should just make that a default if the network actually supports it, instead of forcing me to do it, because both my PS5 and my Portal defaulted to 2.4 GHz, which is great for range, but it's actually bad for streaming performance. But once it's using 5 GHz, Remote Play is a vastly better experience, though your mileage may vary based on your connection speed and strength to your local Wi-Fi router. But we wanted to put Remote Play through its paces on the Portal, so we tested different connections here in the office and outside. Local Wi-Fi had very low latency. There is a bit of latency, but your eyes adjust pretty quickly, and also having the DualSense controller in your hands kind of helps trick your brain into thinking that you are just playing the PS5 and you just adjust to it. Kyler even connected to his PS5 at home from the office, and it was like his console was in the same room. You shouldn't have to worry about input lag while on local Wi-Fi, since the system seems to recognize the Portal as a Bluetooth controller while the screen uses the internet connection. We can't actually confirm this since we have no way to test the latency between the two, but we were able to look at the TV and play Returnal without a hitch in latency. Now, using a hotspot with a 5G connection introduced some hiccups here and there, but it was still a playable experience overall. However, this will eat up data on your data plan, so just keep that in mind as you're doing it. But the last test we tried out was our Starlink setup, which we also used to stream when we're on the road. It's how we pulled off the Cannonball for the Cure charity stream. And in residential or metropolitan areas, or just areas with a lot of trees, the connection falters more often than on the hotspot, but that's just how Starlink is. But it was perfectly fine while stationary, and it would be perfect while we're driving across the country. You know, you have the person who's the driver, and then your passenger is just playing on the Portal. It's actually an incredible setup. And we tested this all while we were live streaming too, so it seems pretty impressive. Now, I will say that using the Portal outside or in well-lit environments isn't the best, since the screen has a lot of glare that casts off of it, and the display is not bright enough to compensate for that. And you will also have to deal with fingerprints dirtying the screen up, since it picks those up pretty easily. And although the Portal has a DualSense split in half for the gamepad, some differences exist between the Portal's controller and the regular one. You'll notice that the sticks are smaller and the overall shape is slightly skinnier. The PS button is now on the left beside the share button, and the mute button has moved to the right besides the options button. In place of the touchpad are two translucent zones on the touchscreen on the bottom left and right of the screen. The light bar is still here, though it is also split in half. I really like how the LEDs look as they encompass more of the controller, but you can turn them down or off to conserve some battery life. Those are the only things different about the gamepad, since you still get the mini PS symbols for the texture on the grips, a gyroscope for motion, the signature haptics, and adaptive triggers. And you still get the gross white setup that will inevitably dirty and turn into a smudge fest on the back. But ergonomically, this is the best gaming handheld that I have ever held. You'll notice that most gaming handhelds, PC gaming handhelds, take on a similar form factor. They're all rounded and force you to fully cup the sides like this, with your pinkies and everything falling down behind the back of the device. Now, the Lenovo Legion Go that we have here, you do get to separate, so you can open your hands a little bit or keep things separated. But the DualSense ergonomics, where I get to hold this like I do a regular controller, I get to freely keep my fingers open without having to lose control of the device, being able to put my fingers in between the screen, honestly makes this so much more comfortable for extended long play sessions. buttons. And while the sticks are smaller, the face buttons and the D-pad seem unchanged from the DualSense. It's nice to see that Sony keeps these things the same, since many other handhelds do sometimes get small buttons. Now, you still get speakers, though they can get very loud. Audio quality is pretty standard for a device like this, but I'd recommend getting a pair of headphones if you plan to use this in public or around others, because even the quietest mode on this is still too loud sometimes. I was sitting next to my wife while she was working, and I was playing Final Fantasy 16, and Clive makes some noises when he does his summons, like "Bruh!" And every once in a while my wife would look over being like, "I'm working, what are you doing? I don't want to hear this man scream while you're next to me." Now, what is actually wrong with the PS Portal? Personally, I don't like that the device doesn't automatically connect through the 5 gigahertz, or that you can't use it for streaming media, though that seems that it's not a Sony imposed limitation. I also don't like that there is no percentage bar for the battery indicator. You get 3 bars like a regular controller on the PS5, but it's not enough for me to know how much battery I actually have left in this. But the most egregious miss is honestly the lack of Bluetooth. I know you can plug into the headphone jack, which also allows for 3D audio where compatible, but Sony definitely just dropped the ball here. It's even worse since we have to wait for Sony's PlayStation Link audio devices to be released sometime in December or later. We tried using a pair of headphones with a USB dongle, but that still didn't work. Now, I love the Portal for some very specific reasons. I have a history on this channel of seeking out the best bed gaming setup. I've tried to find ways that I can enjoy my video games while my wife watches TVs, which leads me to have a plethora of devices that I get to check out thanks to having this YouTube channel. And I can tell you that after having so many different things, the Portal scratches an itch that I've had that none of these other devices can satisfy. Yes, you can use other apps like Chiaki in order to use remote play, but you have to do weird workarounds for the audio in order to get them to work properly. Then you're also dealing with the worse ergonomics, as well as the fact that you don't have the exact haptics that the PlayStation 5 offers. And personally, some of my favorite games happen to be PlayStation single-player story-driven narrative games, and that is exactly what the Portal unlocks for me to do. I have a PlayStation that sits unused a lot of the time simply because it is connected to the TV that I share with other members of my household. And that is why this is the Dad Station 5. I will always, as a father and as a husband, defer to everybody else in my house getting to do what they want with the television or me being around with them. However, this unlocks the ability for me to still do that and also play the games that I want in the way that I can enjoy it the best. Having this in the shape of a DualSense controller, giving me both the adaptive triggers, all of the haptic rumble, everything that the PlayStation 5 brought technologically to the controller, while also being able to have a seamless setup to connect to my PlayStation both here at my house, in my truck, or even at the hospital, makes it worth the price for me, because none of these other handhelds can actually achieve what the PS Portal does. And Sony has even said this. We already talked about how the bill of materials kind of get you to the point where this functionally gets close to the price with a little bit of markup. But Sony has said that the PlayStation Portal, the whole point isn't about making a profit, it's to get people to spend more time on their PS5. For me to be able to sit next to my wife while she's working and not have to use the TV and use remote play on this device and still get as close to the best PlayStation experience that I can get makes the Portal a very, very exciting prospect. And there are also plenty of other things that Sony can do in the future with the Portal. This seems to be a step in their march towards things like cloud gaming. That's something that the Logitech G Cloud handles, all of them, the cloud streaming, and this only plays games locally. But it seems like Sony, at least according to rumors, is working on rolling out a PS5 streaming setup where you can use it on your Portal potentially as the years go on. Now, it could be that the Portal ends up in the graveyard of devices past that Sony has released, like the PlayStation TV, the PS TV, the PS Vita, the PlayStation Portable, the PSP Go, I believe was something at one point. Sony has a track record of launching these things to great, at least enthusiast acclaim, but then it misses the mark on the wider launch. And I think the Portal is kind of in a middle ground here. It's not quite clear if there's going to be enough mass adoption. These things were sold out on launch day. You couldn't get them anywhere if you didn't pre-order them, at least here in the United States. But I'm excited to see where the future is. I'm not sure if I trust Sony all too much on it. I think this portal solves a problem that a lot of people know that they have. I don't know if I can convince anybody that they have the need for the portal unless they recognize that they don't get to play games as often as they want to because they can't have access to the television all of the time that they have free in order to entertain themselves. The portal knocks it out of the park in my book. It is everything that I could have possibly wanted. The price point is just low enough that it made sense for me to pick up for myself as well as for my team members here in the office because they also can benefit from being able to use their PlayStation that's in the attic, but they want to be in their living room, which is 3 floors down because Pittsburgh homes are built different sometimes. I think Sony's right. This is going to let me play a lot more PlayStation games than I ever have before.